Have you ever found yourself looking at the world, maybe at history, or just the established narratives, and felt like something isn't quite right? Like there's a fundamental glitch in the system somewhere. Maybe a piece of the puzzle that's been, I don't know, hidden or subtly altered. It's that nagging feeling, that intuitive sense maybe, that the true picture of our spiritual heritage, our identity, even divine order, it feels obscured, hidden beneath a carefully constructed facade. What if the very foundations of what we believe, what we think is true, are operating on a faulty program?
That's a powerful starting point. And today, we're really embarking on a profound deep dive. We're getting into Elder Michael Johnson's teaching, which he titled The Masquerade in the Vineyard, the Matrix. And he uses two incredibly potent metaphors right off the bat. They really set the stage for his insights. First, he talks about the vineyard. Now, for him, this is much more than just, a literal field. It represents the pure spiritual lineage of Israel, its sacred inheritance, the divine covenant. And this vineyard, he argues, has been constantly under threat, constantly susceptible to corruption from what he calls wild vines.
Okay, wild vines. And the second metaphor?
The second is the matrix. And he elevates this concept far beyond, any sci-fi movie reference. He describes it as a spiritual transmission chamber. A sacred space, really, where divine judgment happens, where inheritance is proven, and it's where the covenant is either faithfully transferred or, crucially, dangerously distorted. It's the very mechanism, in his view, through which spiritual identity is established and maintained.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's jump right into the heart of it. Our mission today, for you listening, is to meticulously navigate Elder Johnson's arguments. We're drawing directly from his scripture-rich presentation. It's dense, full of what he calls divine logic, and we want to understand his perspective on what he unequivocally calls the masquerade. Now, this isn't just about a hidden identity or some simple misunderstanding. No, he presents it as a profound deception, one involving false claims to spiritual heritage. He posits that Israel's true spiritual heritage has been systematically corrupted.
Right, systematically.
And this corruption, he believes, happened through various means. The intermixing of the holy seed with common flesh, that's one. Then there's the assertion of false claims to a divine inheritance. And finally, the insidious subversion of culture that leads to what he sees as a profound spiritual crisis in our modern world. So our aim here is just to lay out his case, letting you grasp the spiritual equations and prophecies he presents. We're not here to endorse or refute his specific viewpoints, just to explore them.
Indeed. And our source material is Elder Johnson's direct, very impassioned teaching. He carefully constructs his case. He leverages what he calls divine logic and really an extensive array of scriptural references to challenge us. He encourages us, and you listening, to examine identity not through conventional historical lenses or even purely racial ones, but honestly and most critically, spiritually. He really pushes us to look beyond the surface appearances, beyond common assumptions, urging us to delve into the very core of covenant and lineage as he understands it.
All right, so let's begin with this really captivating idea of the matrix. As you said, it's not just science fiction for Elder Johnson. He gives it this profound spiritual meaning that, well, it dramatically redefines how we might think about inheritance and origin. What exactly is this spiritual transmission chamber in his view? Why is redefining it so significant?
Well, he defines the matrix as something far more fundamental than just the physical room, though it definitely encompasses that biblical understanding, from passages like Exodus 13:12, that refers to the firstborn that opens the matrix. But for him, it's a spiritual transmission chamber, a sacred gateway, maybe a transfer mechanism that defines one's spiritual source and lineage. This isn't simply about the act of being born, it's about the very foundational spiritual laws governing creation and identity itself. He emphasizes, and I'm quoting him here, "The matrix is my sacred transmission chamber. None enter but the first that open the matrix, and declareth his source, as it is written of the firstborn of Israel, whom I have claimed to myself."
Wow, okay, so declaring the source is key.
Exactly. It means that to open the matrix isn't just a physical event, it's a declaration of Jehovah's ownership. It's the establishment of a spiritual estate, if you will. And this redefinition is crucial because it suggests that true heritage isn't merely inherited biologically, like passing down eye color. It's actively transmitted through a divine mechanism, one governed by specific, unchanging spiritual laws. It makes lineage a matter of profound divine intent and spiritual law, rather than just, a genetic accident or some historical claim someone makes later.
Okay, here's where the narrative takes a really critical turn, right? Elder Johnson introduces what he calls the glitch, a fundamental corruption within this sacred spiritual transmission. He paints a very vivid, very stark picture. and he focuses intensely on the mingling of the holy seed with common flesh. How does he illustrate this spiritual defilement? What makes it such a significant corruption in his teaching?
He argues that the core glitch, the fundamental error, is precisely the mingling of the holy seed of Israel with the people of this world. For him, this isn't just like social mingling or intermarriage in a modern sense. It's a profound spiritual defilement, one that leads to a diluted and ultimately defiled lineage. To help us grasp the impact, he uses several powerful scriptural analogies. He references the law in Leviticus 19:19 and Deuteronomy 7:3-4. These explicitly forbid sowing a vineyard with diverse seeds, meaning different kinds of seeds together, or even intermarriage with certain groups.
Right, the principle of separation.
Exactly. He explains that just as you wouldn't plant wheat and barley in the same row and expect a pure, unmixed harvest, right? You cannot mix distinct, pure spiritual elements without corrupting the intended outcome. It just doesn't work according to this divine logic. This act of mingling, he states, creates troubled waters where reflections are distorted, unclear. A spiritual muddiness, you could say. And the implication is stark. This isn't an external attack primarily, but an internal corruption. He notes this mingling corrupted the vine from within, making it impossible for that vine, representing Israel, to produce its intended pure spiritual fruit. It fundamentally compromises the integrity of the divine plan for Israel's lineage.
So if this holy seed gets mixed, what are the implications for how spiritual transmission actually happens then? It sounds like Elder Johnson draws a very clear, very absolute line. He distinguishes fundamentally between how uncleanliness spreads and how holiness must be, well, meticulously cultivated. These sound like two vastly different processes.
Oh, they absolutely are, and the contrast he paints is stark. Elder Johnson highlights that unlike holiness, uncleanness is inherently contagious. It spreads by contact as a river that overflows its banks, much like a physical contagion that requires no active effort to transmit it. You just touch it and it spreads. He cites Haggai 2:11, which illustrates how merely touching an unclean thing can defile other things, emphasizing how easily spiritual defilement can spread. In his view, a corrupted inheritance cascades through the generations, staining multitudes by the iniquities of their fathers almost effortlessly.
It's just flowing downhill, basically.
Exactly. But holiness, in his teaching, is entirely different. Holiness floweth not by accident, but it must be poured with intent by a vessel consecrated and pure. It's not something that passively spreads like a virus. It requires deliberate consecration, an intentional act of devotion, a heartfelt offering. It must be actively guarded, carefully cultivated, consciously transferred through pure channels. This makes it a demanding and highly intentional process, the complete opposite of the effortless spread of defilement.
And the consequences of this glitch, this mingling.
The spiritual fallout for Elder Johnson is incredibly profound. It's far-reaching. He teaches that when holy blood is mixed with profane, it doesn't just dilute it like watering down juice. It actively mutes the voice of the covenant. Imagine trying to hear a whisper in a shouting crowd. This leads, he says, to generations of children who know not their true heritage, becoming neither hot nor cold, but lukewarm in the mouth of the Lord. This isn't just spiritual apathy, like not caring. It's presented as a fundamental confusion, an inability to discern their true identity and purpose. This spiritual ambiguity, the state of being lukewarm, is presented as a direct and severe consequence of altering the Jehovah order, the divine blueprint for how things are meant to function. By disrupting that sacred flow of spiritual inheritance, the very connection to the divine covenant is compromised, leaving individuals spiritually adrift, unable to fulfill their intended role.
Okay, building on that foundation of the corrupted matrix and the nature of holiness, Elder Johnson then draws a direct, really critical connection between the spiritual corruption and the covenant marriage. He calls marriage a sacred mirror. What does this mirror reflect in Jehovah's grand design? What truths does it reveal about the divine order itself?
Yes, for Elder Johnson, marriage is precisely the sacred mirror wherein heavenly bridegroom is reflected on the earthly husband. This isn't just nice symbolism for him, it's a direct, foundational pattern established by Jehovah from the very beginning. The earthly husband, in this divine order he describes, is meant to be the server and the giver, reflecting the sacrificial love and headship of salvation of Jehovah. The wife, conversely, is cast as the receiver, embodying the church's role of surrendering to and receiving from salvation of Jehovah. He references 1 Corinthians 7:4 here. So this mirror isn't merely reflecting some social structure that evolved over time. No, it's reflecting the very relationship between Jehovah and his covenant people. It's presented as an inviolable blueprint, a microcosm of the celestial order, meant to demonstrate the divine relationship right here on earth.
But this sacred mirror, like the spiritual matrix, he says it can be shattered. Elder Johnson describes what he terms a great terrible rebellion. one that actively inverts this Jehovah order, fundamentally disrupting the divine design he just laid out. What does this rebellion look like in practice? How does it manifest in ways that defy that sacred blueprint?
He explains that this great terrible rebellion is precisely what shattered the mirror. How? By inverting the established Jehovah order. Instead of the natural divine flow where the wife receives, he describes a world where the earth commanded the heavens to receive, where there's a desire for the crown without the covering. It's portrayed as an act of profound defiance, where the intended spiritual roles are turned upside down and the natural flow of divine authority is not only resisted but actively reversed. He critiques contemporary phrases, for instance, like happy wife, happy life. He labels it a deceiving whisper.
A deceiving whisper. Why?
Because in his view, it fundamentally inverts the Jehovah order. It makes earthly happiness the ultimate goal, rather than alignment with divine will and purpose. It thereby prioritizes human desire, human comfort, over the established spiritual design. It's a subtle shift, maybe, but he sees it as a powerful subversion that undermines the very foundation of the sacred mirror he described.
And does he give specific examples of this rebellion?
Oh yes, he's quite direct and provides stark examples of this rebellion against the Jehovah order. He presents the imagery of the wife baking her own bread of independence while demanding the covering of marriage. This is a direct reference he makes to Isaiah 4:1. You remember where 7 women declare they'll provide for themselves, wear their own clothes, but still demand to be called by a man's name to take away their reproach. For Elder Johnson, this signifies a profound spiritual disconnect, a desire for the outward benefits of covenant protection, identity, without the corresponding submission or adherence to its divine order. It's claiming the crown, as he puts it, without accepting the covering.
Wanting the benefits without the responsibility, essentially.
Right. That's how he frames it. Another clear and critical example he emphasizes is intermarriage, specifically when daughters of Israel join themselves to the uncircumcised and the sons of take wives from among the heathen. He argues this act breaks the sacred reflection and confuses the Jehovah image. It's not just a societal mixing for him, it's a spiritual blurring of lines, one that fundamentally distorts the divine pattern of purity and distinction that Jehovah established. He even brings up Moses' trespass striking the rock twice in Numbers 20:11-12. Now, Moses merely altered the method of obedience, right? But Elder Johnson asserts that this rebellion in marriage is even greater.
Greater than Moses' sin that kept him from the promised land. Why?
Because, he argues, this rebellion in marriage would break the oracle, nullify the pattern, and the divorce of the earth from heaven. He's arguing it's not merely a deviation from a command, it's a complete catastrophic rejection of the divine blueprint for relationship, for spiritual transmission, for the very fabric of the covenant itself. It severs the earthly reflection from its heavenly source, leading, in his view, to spiritual chaos.
So what is this pervasive rebellion, this shattering of the sacred mirror? What does it ultimately mean for someone's covenant with salvation of Jehovah? Elder Johnson doesn't mince words about the spiritual consequences, does he? It sounds like the stakes for adhering to this divine order are incredibly high in his teaching.
He is absolutely unequivocal on this point, crystal clear. Elder Johnson states that those who refuse to mirror the image and who yield to rebellion in marriage and not mirroring the way of salvation of Jehovah, they are, in his profound view, already removed from the covenant with salvation of Jehovah. That's a tremendously powerful statement. It suggests the spiritual separation isn't some future judgment, but a present reality for those who defy the established order. He emphasizes that one's inability to submit to the earthly reflection demonstrate that your spirit was never truly joined to the heavenly reality.
Wow. So the earthly reveals the heavenly state.
Precisely. If you cannot adhere to the divine pattern for relationships on earth, the sacred mirror, it reveals a much deeper, fundamental spiritual disconnect from the heavenly reality of salvation of Jehovah. The earthly act, or the rebellion, becomes a stark indicator of a spiritual condition. It signifies that the individual was never truly integrated into the divine covenant in the first place. The stakes, as you said, couldn't be higher. It impacts one's eternal spiritual standing, according to his interpretation.
This brings us to a really profound dilemma, a huge question. If the human spiritual matrix is so easily corrupted by this mingling, by this rebellion, how then does Jehovah preserve a sacred, pure lineage for himself? It seems like an almost impossible challenge, especially given the consistent human tendency to mess things up.
Indeed, and this is precisely the central, profound challenge that Elder Johnson confronts head-on in his teaching. He frames it as a core question. He asks, if the human matrix is so easily corrupted, how does Jehovah's sacred, pure lineage for himself? And he follows right up with the crucial inquiry, how is this holy inheritance transferred without being contaminated? These aren't rhetorical questions for him. They delve into the very integrity of Jehovah's promises. How can God's plan succeed despite human failure? It underscores the absolute necessity for an uncorrupted channel, a pure conduit, through which divine truth and holy inheritance can flow untainted through the generations, defying human fallibility, defying rebellion.
Okay, let's unpack this specific solution he offers. Elder Johnson points to a very specific, deliberate act by Jehovah to solve this seemingly insurmountable problem. It's the substitution of the Levites. What was it about them? What made them the chosen transfer mechanism to ensure the preservation of this pure spiritual lineage?
Well, Elder Johnson teaches that Jehovah, understanding the inherent corruption within the fleshly matrix, the limitations and defilements of natural biological birth, he did not take direct ownership of every naturally born firstborn of Israel. This was a profound strategic decision, according to this teaching. Instead, he chose a specific, deliberate act of claiming and redeeming through substitution. He substituted the Levites for the firstborn, as meticulously detailed in Numbers 3:12-13. What made the Levites unique? Their allegiance was proven unequivocally at the golden calf incident. Remember, they stood with Jehovah when many others rebelled.
But they chose Jehovah over their own kin even.
Exactly. That act of unwavering loyalty, of choosing Jehovah above all else, solidified their position in this view. They became, in Elder Johnson's words, the purified channel, a living, breathing transfer mechanism. This was Jehovah's chosen method, he argues, to bypass the general corruption and ensure that holy inheritance, covenant blessings, and divine truth could be transmitted without being compromised by the fallibility of the fleshly matrix. They were consecrated, set apart, specifically for this sacred duty.
So it's about proven loyalty, not just bloodline.
Proven loyalty leading to consecration. And this concept of a purified channel is deepened further by that compelling vision of Ezekiel eating the scroll in Ezekiel 3:1. Elder Johnson explains that this isn't just, symbolic theater. It signifies a profound truth for those called to be messengers. He states that such messengers must eat the law, the very will of God, until it becomes part of our innermost being. It has to transcend mere intellectual understanding or just memorizing verses. It's about internalizing Jehovah's word so deeply that it becomes intrinsic to one's spirit, bone, and marrow, as he puts it. Only when the law is absorbed into their very core, when it shapes their thoughts, their words, their actions, only then can they truly function as reliable transfer agents. They carry the message not merely in their hands like holding a book, but truly in his belly, meaning it has become an inseparable part of who they are. This internal transformation ensures the message is transmitted purely, uncorrupted by personal biases or the defilements of the world, making the messenger a living embodiment of the divine word.
So this is moving beyond inheriting just a physical birthright. It's about a spiritual process that bypasses their potentially corrupted physical matrix, creating a new spiritual matrix within these chosen servants. What does this purification process actually involve? How are these individuals refined to become such pure vessels for divine inheritance?
Right. This spiritual matrix within the chosen servant is not something that just happens naturally. It is forged and purified through an intense, often arduous process. Elder Johnson emphasizes that this refinement happens in the furnace of affliction. It is through trials, through tribulations, through the fires of hardship that these individuals become a purified chamber, a sanctified vessel through which Jehovah's inheritance can be transferred without contamination. He describes the Levites, who are the archetype for this priesthood in his teaching, as being tried in the furnace, purified 7 times. That imagery evokes a really thorough, meticulous process of cleansing, removing all impurities, all dross. This refinement ensures they are refined, sanctified, made wholly acceptable to serve as pure vessels. The essence here is that holy inheritance flows not through defiled channels of corrupted flesh, but through this refined spiritual of his chosen priesthood. It ensures that the divine legacy is passed on through individuals whose spirits have been meticulously prepared and consecrated, guaranteeing the purity and integrity of the transmission.
Okay, this intricate understanding of spiritual purity, corruption, and the Levite solution. It leads us directly to Elder Johnson's most challenging argument, what he terms the masquerade. Quote, he takes these ancient spiritual principles and applies them with striking force to modern history, specifically challenging the claims of identity surrounding the formation of Israel in 1948. This is where he really begins to shine a light on that glitch he spoke of right at the start, isn't it?
It really is. He expresses profound bewilderment and indeed deep concern at how, in his words, the children of Japheth infiltrate through the corruption of this holy principle. He ties this infiltration directly to the law in Deuteronomy 23:2. This scripture states that a basal, which refers to someone born of mixed illegitimate lineage outside the covenant line essentially, should not enter into the congregation of the Lord even unto the 10th generation. For Elder Johnson, this highlights the profound spiritual implications of corrupted heritage and Jehovah's strict divine standard for the purity of his covenant people. He suggests this infiltration wasn't accidental, but occurred through deceptive means, particularly through illicit intermarriage, which allowed a lineage not intended for the covenant to claim a place within it, thereby violating this foundational precept of purity and separation.
And this concern about contamination, this isn't presented as a new issue, is it? Elder Johnson cites Ezra's discovery of widespread contamination back in ancient Israel, and he links it directly to a crafty counsel against Jehovah's people. He suggests these ancient warnings are not just historical footnotes, but are intensely relevant to modern deceptions, perhaps even serving as a historical precedent for the current masquerade he describes.
Absolutely. He highlights Ezra 9:1-2. It vividly describes Ezra's anguish, his discovery of contamination when the holy seed have mingled themselves with the people of those lands, specifically naming various heathen groups. This wasn't just a social problem for Ezra, it was a profound spiritual crisis, threatening the very purity of Israel's lineage. Elder Johnson then draws a direct line from this ancient contamination to the crafty counsel mentioned in Psalms 83:3. This psalm describes a concerted, deceptive strategy where they had taken crafty counsel against our people and consulted against the hidden ones. Come, let us cut them off from being a nation. For Elder Johnson, this isn't just an ancient prayer or lament. It reveals a long-standing, deliberate, multi-generational strategy by hostile entities, a strategy to erase the true identity of Jehovah's people and thereby prevent their promised restoration. He posits that this crafty counsel is not just an ancient threat, but an ongoing active deception that continues to manifest in the modern era, culminating in what he calls the masquerade.
Okay, so let's get specific about his critique of 1948.
Right. Elder Johnson's critique of the 1948 formation of the modern state of Israel is absolutely central and unflinching in his teaching. He refers to the event, sometimes described as a sunny birth of a nation in a single day, referencing Isaiah 66:8. But crucially, he states that it lacks the travail or the spiritual identity scattered by the children of Israel. He questions how a nation, truly rooted in divine promise and spiritual heritage, could be born without the long centuries of suffering, tribulation, and identity formation that he believes characterized the true, scattered Israel. This lack of travail, this apparent suddenness, is a key indicator for him that this is not the prophesied spiritual rebirth.
And he mentions a physical discrepancy, too.
Yes, a significant point he emphasizes is what he calls the racial discrepancy. He asserts, quite directly, that Israel left the house of bondage black, came back white, citing Aji Nazar from 1965. He supports this by referencing Jeremiah 13:23. Can an Ethiopian change his skin or a leopard his spots? He uses this to argue that the current inhabitants of the land do not bear the appearance of those who were scattered. This physical difference becomes a powerful visual piece of his lodging test. Furthermore, he highlights what he sees as profound lack of spiritual marks. He states, "The new vine are grafted in overnight, but not of the holy root where the heart of love of all the people. Where's the peaceable nature proven through centuries?" For him, the true Israel would demonstrate an intrinsic love for all peoples, a peaceable nature forged through centuries of divine interaction, a distinct spiritual character that he argues is absent in the modern state. He concludes with real conviction that the current inhabitants bear neither the flesh nor the spirit of those who were scattered, presenting themselves in his view as more counterfeits, masquerading as the true heirs.
Wow. What's truly insightful, or perhaps challenging depending on your perspective, is Elder Johnson's identification of 4 distinct pillars of deception. He describes this as the serpent's crafty strategy, a multi-pronged attack designed to destroy divine purity and obscure true identity. It sounds like a highly coordinated, comprehensive assault on Jehovah's covenant people.
It is indeed portrayed as a strategic and comprehensive assault. Elder Johnson meticulously outlines these 4 pillars, likening them to a spiritual poison designed to dismantle true Israelite identity. The first pillar is the deliberate mingling of seed to corrupt the bloodline. He asserts this isn't just an accidental social phenomenon, but a calculated strategy to obscure and dilute the distinct, holy spiritual lineage of Israel. He points to historical parallels from Scripture. Pharaoh commanding the destruction of male children wasn't just cruelty, but a strategic effort to weaken Israel's generational strength and purity. Similarly, Haman's efforts to assimilate and thereby erase Israelite identity were, in Elder Johnson's view, part of this same deceptive pillar. For him, this physical intermixing goes far beyond mere social integration. It's a spiritual poison designed to dilute the unique covenant promised to Abraham, making it impossible for the holy seed to produce its intended pure spiritual fruit. It's an attack at the very source of spiritual inheritance.
Okay, that's the first pillar. What's the second?
The second pillar, for Elder Johnson, is the theft of identity, or false claiming. He powerfully illustrates this by drawing a comparison to Esau. Remember, Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of stew, only to later seek to reclaim it through deception, trying to trick Isaac, as detailed in Genesis 27 and 28. This pillar, he argues, manifests in the modern world through things like strategic marriages, political alliances, and the calculated assumption of religious symbols by, in his words, actors pretending upon the stage, wearing the costumes of Israel. These individuals, he claims, speak with Jacob's voice but possess Esau's nature, driven by an ancient grudge, a deep-seated enmity that persists through generations. He then directly quotes Revelation 2:9, stating, "They say they are Jews or followers of Christ and are not. They're the synagogues of Satan." For Elder Johnson, this is a spiritual indictment of those who outwardly claim a covenant identity but inwardly possess a rebellious, unredeemed spirit, thereby masquerading as true Israel.
And just to clarify that phrase he uses, Jews or followers of Christ, how does he interpret that in Revelation 2:9?
Right, that's a key point of his interpretation. Revelation 2:9 traditionally refers to those in Smyrna who claim to be Jews but were not, persecuting the church. Elder Johnson expands this, interpreting Jews or followers of Christ in this context to encompass anyone who falsely claims either the heritage of ancient Israel, Jacob's bloodline as he understands it, or the true identity of following salvation of Jehovah according to divine law, but lacks the spiritual reality, the adherence, the internal transformation. So for him, it's about a spiritual condition of false claim, whether related to ancient Israelite heritage or the true faith and salvation of Jehovah, judged by internal spiritual evidence and adherence to Jehovah's order, not just outward profession or label.
Understood. Okay, the third pillar.
The third pillar of deception, according to Elder Johnson, is the corruption of perceptual understanding. Perceptual, not theological. He identifies false teachers who proclaim that now all nations are Israel. This, in his view, profoundly perverts the sacred promise given exclusively to Abraham in Genesis 12:3. That promise states, "In thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." Elder Johnson's crucial interpretation here is that this blessing does not mean all nations become Israel genetically or covenantally. Rather, it means Israel is uniquely positioned to impart wisdom and knowledge of the Most High, as he reads Isaiah 11:9. He uses a very clear analogy. The moon receives light from the sun, but it does not become the sun itself. Similarly, he argues, nations are meant to be blessed receivers of Jehovah's wisdom through Israel, not covenant inheritors of the unique promises and lineage given specifically to Abraham's seed. This corruption, he argues, blurs distinct spiritual identities and undermines the specific, unique role of Israel within Jehovah's divine plan.
And the final pillar.
Finally, the fourth pillar in this comprehensive strategy of deception is the subversion of culture through foreign customs. This pillar details how Israel, throughout its history, has adopted the ways of the heathen. This isn't just presented as, harmless cultural exchange. It's framed as a spiritual compromise where they forget their ancestral statutes and embrace the traditions of their captors or surrounding nations. This gradual assimilation, this absorption of foreign customs and beliefs, leads, he argues, to a profound loss of true heritage and memory. The distinct markers of their identity, the very essence of their covenant relationship with Jehovah, become blurred and ultimately erased. This subversion weakens the covenant line from within, making it easier for true identity to be forgotten and for the masquerade to take hold, as the genuine spiritual and cultural distinctiveness of Israel fades into a generalized, corrupted form.
One of the most surprising and frankly ingenious points Elder Johnson shares, I thought, was his insight into a single suffix, ish. It seems like such a small, almost insignificant linguistic detail, but he argues it reveals a massive, profound deception about identity. What powerful insight does he draw from the seemingly innocuous suffix?
It is truly a fascinating linguistic detail that Elder Johnson brings right to the forefront. He explains that the suffix ish, as found in words like Swedish, Polish, or, most controversially for his teaching, Jews or followers of Christ, he says it signifies having this characteristic of appearance of something that it is not in the very essence. He argues that when someone is referred to as Jews or followers of Christ, using that ish construction implicitly, it literally means bearing the appearance and the characteristic of a Jew while not being of Jacob's blood. It denotes resemblance rather than intrinsic reality. A similarity, not the actual thing. For him, this seemingly small suffix acts as a built-in identifier, a subtle clue hidden within the very fabric of language itself that points to a fundamental deception about true identity. It's a marker, he claims, of something being a counterfeit rather than authentic, revealing a masquerade where outward appearance mimics truth, but the core essence, the spiritual reality, is fundamentally different. This insight really challenges us, and you listening, to look beyond labels and delve into the true spiritual nature of identity as he defines it.
Right. Now, if we connect all these profound insights to the bigger picture, Elder Johnson doesn't just present these precepts as abstract ideas floating around. He applies them as a rigorous spiritual equation or logic test to the modern state of Israel, meticulously comparing Jehovah's immutable promises with the observed reality on the ground. What does that equation reveal, according to him? How does he argue it exposes a critical, undeniable contradiction?
This is where his teaching becomes exceptionally sharp, very focused. He begins by meticulously laying out Jehovah's undeniable promises for his covenant people, particularly concerning their return and dwelling in their land. God, he emphasizes again and again, promised to bring Israel back to their land where they would dwell there safely. This isn't presented as a conditional safety, like, if you behave, you'll be safe. No, it's framed as a guaranteed divine protection affirmed in scriptures like Ezekiel 28:26, Ezekiel 38:14, and Isaiah 54:17. And crucially, they would no more pollute up out of their land, as stated in Amos 9:14. These promises, he argues, speak of an enduring, secure, and peaceful habitation, established and protected directly by Jehovah's hand, with no external threats or internal corruption. It's a complete restoration marked by divine peace and permanence.
And not only the promise of safety, but divine protection itself. Elder Johnson really emphasizes that Jehovah promised to personally fight for his people. So what does that powerful promise imply about human military efforts? How does that critical detail factor into his spiritual equation regarding the modern state?
Yes, his teaching truly highlights the profound implications of Jehovah's promise of divine protection. He points directly to Exodus 14:14, which unequivocally states, "The Lord, the Spirit of God, shall fight for you." This promise, he argues, inherently means there would be absolutely no need for walls, bars, or gates of protection, no need for elaborate military defenses, and certainly no nuclear weapons. He bolsters this with Isaiah 54:17, declaring, "No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper." Therefore, Elder Johnson concludes, if Jehovah is fighting for his people, any reliance on human military intervention, on sophisticated fortifications like Iron Dome, on external political alliances, or on constant warfare, all of that would be not only unnecessary, but in fact a direct contradiction of the divine promise. It would signify a lack of faith in Jehovah's ability to protect. And critically, for his argument, it would indicate that the people in question are not the recipients of that specific divine promise.
Which brings us to the core argument about 1948.
Exactly. This brings us to the core of Elder Johnson's 1948 contradiction argument. He powerfully contends that the events of 1948, where, in his words, America and other nations transported children of Japheth Ashkenazis, whom he identifies using Genesis 10 as descendants of Japheth, into the land of Jerusalem, he argues this directly contradicts Jehovah's explicit promises of divine restoration. His stark assertion is, not God America did this. In his view, the current occupation of the land is a direct result of international political intervention and human machinations, not Jehovah divine restoration.
And the evidence he points to.
He provides compelling evidence for this contradiction by pointing to the observed reality of the region. Its continuous wars, rockets falling, Iron Dome system desperately intercepting missiles, constant fear. This chaotic, insecure existence, he argues, stands in direct opposition to God's clear promises of safety, peace, and Jehovah's protection for his regathered people. If God promised safety and peace, yet there is constant conflict and fear, then by his divine logic, those experiencing this cannot be the true recipients of the promise. It's a mismatch. Furthermore, he cites Psalms 37:29, "The righteous shall inherit the land and dwell therein forever." He then poses the direct, almost provocative question, are they righteous? All hell is busting loose over there. For Elder Johnson, the ongoing turmoil is not just political, it's a spiritual indicator, a sign. He firmly asserts that Jehovah's word shall not return to me void, citing Isaiah 55:11, meaning that if the guaranteed promised outcomes, peace, safety, divine protection, are visibly absent, then the people currently claiming the promise cannot be the true inheritors. The observed reality, therefore, acts as an irrefutable logic test against the prophetic word in his framework.
This really raises an important question then. Elder Johnson offers what he calls a spiritual calculus, essentially a rigorous logic test to evaluate these claims. It's like a courtroom standard of proof, a very precise method for evaluating any claim against Jehovah's immutable laws. How does the spiritual equation work in practice? How does he instruct us to apply it?
He presents this spiritual calculus or logic test as an absolutely precise and non-negotiable formula for discerning divine truth and fulfillment. He breaks it down very clearly. It starts with biblical law promise stated plus obedience parameters condition required, Jehovah output result guaranteed. This equation establishes the divinely ordained cause and effect relationship as he sees it. The crucial second part of the test then follows logically. If a result absent, epilim broken, or misapplied. This means if Jehovah's guaranteed output or result like safety, peace, divine protection is demonstrably absent, it automatically signals one of two things in his view. Either the covenant has been broken by those claiming it, they aren't meeting the obedience parameters, or the promise is being misapplied to the wrong people altogether.
And how does he apply that directly?
He immediately applies this calculus to the modern situation with razor-sharp precision. He says, if God promised safety and there is no safety in that land, then those people is not the people in that land. Simple logic, he implies. He continues, if God promised to fight for them and they must fight for themselves, then those are not the people in the land. End quote. And finally, if God promised they should no more be pulled up, but they live in constant fear of being driven out, then those people is not the people of the land. End quote. For Elder Johnson, this divine logic leaves absolutely no room for misinterpretation of Jehovah's word or the situation. The empirical evidence of the current reality, when placed against the immutable promises, definitively unmasks the masquerade, according to his teaching.
So as we bring our deep dive towards a close here, Elder Johnson's message emerges as a profound and, let's be honest, truly challenging call. It asks you listening, to examine deeply held beliefs about identity, about restoration, about divine fulfillment. He posits that what we're witnessing in the modern world is not Jehovah's genuine fulfillment of prophecy, but rather a counterfeit garden, a sophisticated masquerade designed to obscure the truth. It's really about looking beneath the surface, past all the appearances, to discern what is truly divine, what truly aligns with Jehovah's word.
Exactly. And he uses incredibly vivid, compelling metaphors to drive this final point home. The present situation in the land for him is clearly a counterfeit garden where strangers planted themselves in the same exact soil, claiming to be the original seed that cannot produce this promised fruit safely in peace. This constant warfare, this ongoing unrest, the perpetual need for human intervention, these are, in his view, undeniable spiritual proofs that the true promised fruit of peace and safety is utterly absent. It's the wrong fruit from the wrong vine. He also powerfully uses the imagery of wolves enter into the sheep for wearing sheep's clothing. These wolves appear as sheep, they blend in, maybe even look the part, but they utterly fail to respond to the safety promise that the authentic sheep do. In other words, when the divine promise of security is not realized, when the sheep aren't safe despite the promise, it reveals the true predatory nature of those who are merely masquerading in covenant clothing. It exposes them, he argues, as not being the genuine heirs.
Elder Johnson leaves us with a stark warning then, and a profound call to action, doesn't he? It's a powerful closing thought, urging us to examine identity honestly, spiritually, and to hold fast to divine logic, rather than being swayed by counterfeit appearances or traditional narratives we've inherited.
He does, and it's a sobering call. He cites Jeremiah 5:30-31, which says, "A wonderful and horrible thing is committed in the land. The prophet prophesied falsely, and the priests bear rule by their means, and my people love to have it so. And what will ye do in the end thereof?" This passage for Elder Johnson highlights the danger of spiritual complacency and even complicity of people who embrace deception because it's comfortable or convenient or fits their narrative. He also powerfully reiterates Revelation 2:9, stating, "I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews or followers of Christ, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan." This is presented as a direct spiritual indictment of false claims to identity, emphasizing that true spiritual wealth lies not in outward profession or geopolitical status, but in authentic lineage and adherence to Jehovah's truth, as he defines it.
So what's the final message for the true people in his view?
His final message is one of hope and enduring promise for Jehovah's true people, wherever they may be. He firmly believes that Jehovah's authentic lineage is still scattered among all the people from one end of the earth into another, quoting Deuteronomy 28:64. They are awaiting God's true gathering and restoration. And this restoration, he stresses, will not come through human efforts, not through nations, not through politics, and certainly not through masquerades like the one he believes occurred in 1948. It will come by Jehovah's own hand in his perfect timing, a restoration that will be unmistakable in its peace, safety, and divine fulfillment, utterly unlike the current observed reality.
So, reflecting on all this, what does this mean for you listening right now? If Elder Johnson's profound argument holds weight, that lineage and identity are proven not just by historical claim or outward appearance, but by spiritual fruit and unwavering adherence to Jehovah's immutable laws, then what spiritual equations, what logic tests might you apply to your own understanding of heritage, your understanding of faith, or even just your understanding of the world around you? Where might you begin to look for that glitch in the narratives you've accepted, a glitch that, once understood through this lens, could reveal a deeper, more authentic truth about your own spiritual standing or the world's condition?
And that raises an even more critical question, perhaps, for personal reflection. How does one truly discern authentic spiritual identity in a world so filled with these potential masquerades, where appearances can be so incredibly deceiving and established narratives can be so powerful and misleading? And, maybe most importantly, what personal transformation is required of each of us to genuinely align with Jehovah's uncorrupted word, as Elder Johnson presents it, ensuring that our own spiritual matrix, our own connection, is pure, consecrated, and truly reflective of his divine order.
It's definitely a lot to consider, a truly challenging and thought-provoking deep dive into Elder Michael Johnson's presentation, The Masquerade in the Vineyard, The Matrix.
Oh.
His insights certainly give us, and hopefully you, a tremendous amount to chew on and reflect upon. Keep exploring these ideas, keep questioning the narratives, because maybe, as he suggests, when you shine a light on the glitches, when you meticulously apply that spiritual calculus, that's truly where the real clarity begins to emerge.
The elders of Israel knocked on the wrong door when a master Hebrew stands. Knocking on the door of King James Bible University makes you more foolish than any man.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a concept that might sound like science fiction at first glance.
Right.
But for our source material today, it's described as a profound spiritual reality. The matrix. The place where your reasoning is determined.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the familiar idea of the matrix, yeah, it often brings up images of simulated realities, hidden truths from the movies.
Sir, Keanu Reeves and all that.
Exactly. But our deep dive today focuses on something really distinct. It's an unyielding exposition from Elder Michael Johnson, who's a pastor and master Hebraist of biblical law.
Okay.
And he presents this idea of a spiritual, even a judicial chamber, where every single thought, every motive, every decision you make actually stands trial.
Wow.
It's a powerful idea, really. It fundamentally challenges how we think about truth, consciousness, and, well, personal accountability.
It's really fascinating, isn't it, how Elder Johnson frames this matrix. It's not speculative fiction for him at all.
No.
It's presented as a very real, divine courtroom, an active spiritual reality, you could say.
Governed by Jehovah's standards.
Exactly. Governed by the immutable standards and precepts of Jehovah. And within it, all human reasoning is constantly being measured, weighed, and ultimately judged.
So for this deep dive, what sources are we working with?
We've got quite a bit, actually. Elder Johnson's sermons, his detailed study guides, and various transcripts of his teachings. They're pretty extensive.
Okay.
And our mission here really is to meticulously pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights from all this material.
To help understand the implications?
Right, to help you grasp the profound implications of having your own reasoning determined by these eternal divine precepts versus, the fleeting influences of the worldly realm.
So this isn't just like a simple metaphor in his teaching.
Not at all. He describes it as a powerful, almost tangible framework. He defines the matrix as a spiritual matrix, or even more broadly, a divine inheritance system.
A divine inheritance system. Interesting.
Yeah. And within this system, your reasoning, basically your entire framework for understanding the world and your place in it, is meant to be perfectly aligned.
Aligned with what exactly?
With Jehovah's eternal precepts and his pure frequencies. The ultimate goal, as he puts it, is for our internal holy matrix to magnify within us.
Making sure our reasoning is consistently determined by those divine principles.
Precisely. And the big danger he identifies is allowing ourselves to be swayed by carnal traditions of the world. He calls these counterfeit signals.
Counterfeit signals.
Or even what he calls profane invention. So for Elder Johnson, our minds are essentially a constant, active spiritual battleground.
That makes sense. It's an ongoing struggle.
Expanding on that, Elder Johnson uses a really vivid similitude. He likens the human heart to a spiritual receiver.
A receiver, like a radio.
Sort of, yeah. A receiver that needs perfect tuning to connect with Jehovah's true frequencies.
Does he get specific about this tuning?
He actually does. He even gets into a specific numerical value, suggesting 432 hertz is the frequency of divine innocence.
432 hertz, okay.
This, he teaches, is the ideal vibrational alignment, where Jehovah's pure, uncorrupted communication really resonates with the human spirit. It leads to divine harmony, clarity.
Which naturally leads to the question, what happens if our receiver is, well, off, picking up the wrong signals?
Right. And according to Elder Johnson, when our heart receiver is tuned to the world's static, carnal traditions, man-made philosophies, it inevitably leads to what he calls broken cisterns that cannot sustain divine life force.
Broken cisterns, that's from Jeremiah, isn't it?
It is. And these broken cisterns, they aren't just inadequate. They're symbolic of human efforts and reasoning that offer no genuine life-giving truth.
And the result.
Ultimately, confusion, spiritual disease, and a deviation from Jehovah's divine order.
Building on that powerful image, Elder Johnson's central theme seems to be the courtroom of the mind.
That's a core concept, yes.
Can you unpack that a bit? Imagine this as like a deeply personal and inescapable reality.
Okay.
Every thought you have, every imagination you entertain, every conclusion you reach, it's not just a private thing inside your head.
Right. It's presented somewhere.
Exactly. It's presented before Jehovah's law. Your reasoning gets stripped bare, exposed directly to the statutes and precepts of Jehovah.
Wow. So there's no hiding.
None. In this divine courtroom, there's no hiding behind man-made traditions, no comfort in appealing to, soothing philosophies, no convenient excuses.
He draws a parallel here, doesn't he, with the high priest?
He does. Just as the high priest of old entered the most holy place to stand before the Ark of Testimony. So, too, Elder Johnson explains, each person metaphorically enters this matrix. You're confronting the stark reality of whether your innermost thoughts, your conclusions, truly align with Jehovah's divine law, or if they're just rooted in vanity and, self-deception.
This naturally brings us to think about, who can actually discern truth in this profound courtroom of the mind? Who has that capacity?
Good question. What does he say?
Elder Johnson asserts that only those whose hearts are spiritually calibrated, those truly attuned to the frequency of Jehovah's wisdom, can genuinely discern truth.
And everyone else.
Everyone else, he suggests, is operating on a different frequency. They remain bound in what he calls the static of confusion, trapped in the shadows of man-made doctrines, lacking genuine insight.
So it highlights a huge difference between real insight and just surface understanding.
A profound difference, yeah, between genuine, Jehovah-given insight, that deep spiritual knowing, and a superficial fleshly understanding that just takes things at face value.
Face value isn't enough.
Not according to this teaching. Without that essential spiritual attunement, that ability to differentiate the pure from the counterfeit, Elder Johnson argues you're just operating as a knowledge hunter.
Like the Pharisees.
Exactly like the Pharisees, accumulating facts without experiencing true spiritual transformation or real understanding.
Okay, let's dig deeper into this idea of discernment. He makes a distinction, right, between spiritual and fleshly.
A crucial distinction, yes. Spiritual discernment versus fleshly discernment.
And spiritual discernment isn't just casual.
No, he clarifies it's not passive.
Yeah.
It demands deep, intentional meditation on Jehovah's teachings, an active, disciplined engagement with his word to really grasp its profound depths and nuances.
As opposed to
fleshly discernment, which is just taking things at face value. A superficial look without that essential deep contemplation and spiritual engagement.
And that leaves you?
That leaves you with a shallow understanding. Essentially, he says, in a state where you're spiritually deaf to the true frequencies of heaven.
You might hear the words, but not the meaning.
Exactly. The deeper meaning, the divine essence, the life-transforming power, it remains completely hidden from your perception.
What's really revealing here is how Elder Johnson connects this directly to Scripture.
Yes, he specifically cites 1 Corinthians 2:14.
Can you remind us what that says?
Sure. It states, "The natural man, male or female, receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned."
So that really underscores his point. Worldly learning, even if it's impressive intellectually.
Right, no matter how vast or profound it seems, it can leave you spiritually deaf to Jehovah's true frequencies. The natural man, operating just on carnal reasoning and what they can sense, simply can't grasp these profound spiritual truths.
So you could have tons of knowledge but still be blind spiritually.
Precisely. Without that genuine spiritual insight, that divine attunement, you might possess immense intellectual knowledge, yet remain profoundly blind to the living, transforming wisdom that comes directly from Jehovah.
He uses examples of people who were tuned in, right?
He does. He frequently brings up the woman of Samaria in John chapter 4, verse 19, or young Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 10.
What was special about them?
In both cases, their hearts were clearly receptive. They were tuned in, recognizing and responding with covenant obedience to the divine frequency of Jehovah.
So they're like models of true seekers.
Exactly. Archetypes of those who possess the spiritual sensitivity to hear and respond to Jehovah's authentic voice amidst all the noise of the world.
But he warns about the opposite, too.
Yes, a grave warning. Without this vital spiritual discernment, you're highly susceptible to what he calls Pharaoh's counterfeit signals.
Pharaoh's counterfeit signals, what's the analogy there?
He uses this vivid analogy of being in a really noisy, crowded room, lots of voices speaking, right?
Okay.
And only a select few can actually hear the clear, resonant message through all that clamor and confusion.
So the counterfeit signals are like that background noise, designed to mislead.
Precisely. Much like those used by Pharaoh's magicians, Jannes and Jambres, back in Exodus chapter 7, verses 11 to 12.
Yeah.
They might mimic divine power or truth,
But they're not real.
but they carry a vibrational signature of rebellion and deception, specifically designed to mislead and ultimately spiritually ensnare you.
And elaborating on these counterfeit signals, the source material talks about Satan himself.
Yes, it describes Satan as the ultimate counterfeit, someone who masquerades as an angel of light. That's from 2 Corinthians 11:14.
And his ministers do the same.
Similarly, yeah. His ministers mimic righteousness, but they teach from what Elder Johnson calls a corrupted transmission, not Jehovah's pure word.
The Jannes and Jambres example really illustrates that.
It powerfully illustrates the deception. Their outward appearance, their actions, they seemed potent, right?
Yeah, they replicated Moses' miracles.
But they utterly lacked true divine authority, spiritual purity, and that genuine connection to Jehovah.
So Elder Johnson stresses caution.
Strongly emphasizes the critical warning from Matthew 7:15. Beware of false prophets which should come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves.
And how do you know them?
He clarifies meticulously. You'll know them by their fruits, meaning their inherent character and the actual results of their teachings.
Which have to align with Jehovah's Spirit.
Absolutely. Things like love, joy, peace, that stands in stark contrast to the works of the flesh. Adultery, hatred, heresies, other destructive behaviors, like Paul lists in Galatians 5:19 to 23.
So the outward show means nothing if the inside is corrupt.
Exactly. The apparent power means absolutely nothing if the inner fruit is corrupt and doesn't glorify Jehovah.
Which brings us back to the question, why do people fall for this? Why do they err so often?
Elder Johnson points straight to Matthew 22:29. He says people do err not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God.
And it's more than just not knowing the facts.
Oh yeah, it's identified as a profound spiritual blindness. He also highlights Mark 7:13, which warns directly against making Jehovah's word of none effect through your traditions.
Tradition gets in the way.
Hugely. And pride, too. Pride emerges as a really significant barrier. It often subtly masquerades as genuine spiritual knowledge or, superior understanding.
And it actually blinds you.
Yes, this insidious pride creates a spiritual veil. It actively prevents divine revelations from being received, even when truth is presented clearly right in front of you.
That's dangerous.
It distorts our spiritual perception, causing us to tragically mistake spiritual blindness for true spiritual light. It's like Isaiah 5:20 warned about those who call evil good and good evil.
Sounds like the original deception in Genesis.
It echoes that ancient serpent's deception in Genesis 3:5, doesn't it? Where humanity was tempted to be as God, knowing good and evil, trying to define truth apart from Jehovah.
And where does that ultimately lead?
It leads to committing what Jeremiah 2:13 prophesied as two evils. First, forsaking Jehovah, the divine fountain of living waters.
And second.
And second, hewing out broken cisterns for yourselves, these man-made systems and traditions that can hold no true knowledge, no life-sustaining truth.
Let's shift to another concept he uses, GMO abominations. That sounds modern.
It does, but he takes it far beyond just genetically modified food.
Okay.
For him, this term represents any synthetic thing that contaminates the bodies and soul. It's a much broader definition.
So it includes spiritual contamination too.
Yes, pervasive spiritual and genetic chaos that, according to his teaching, results directly from human rebellion against Jehovah's natural, perfect order.
It's like a metaphor for messing with Jehovah's design.
A broad, powerful metaphor
Yeah.
for anything that tries to manipulate, alter, or somehow improve upon what Jehovah originally made very good.
And what's particularly insightful here is how he connects this back to Genesis.
Right, Genesis 1:31. God saw that everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good.
Jehovah set boundaries.
Clear, unchangeable boundaries and distinctions for creation. And this principle is reinforced throughout the law, isn't it?
Yeah, things like diverse kinds for cattle, not mixing seeds.
Exactly, the prohibition against mingled seed for fields, which you find in Leviticus 19:19.
And Johnson argues that breaking these boundaries is rebellion.
He argues that any act of mingling the boundaries of creation constitutes a profound spiritual rebellion. He sees it as humanity presumptuously trying to improve on Jehovah's perfected design.
Leading back to those broken cisterns.
Leading back to the broken cisterns that cannot sustain divine life force, and a deviation from the pure intended spiritual and natural order.
No, this is where he applies this concept in a way that's, well, it's deeply impactful. And for some listeners, it might be challenging, even controversial.
Yes, this is a significant part of his teaching.
He explicitly condemns what he calls racial mixing, labeling it hybridization.
He does, equating it directly to this spiritual principle of mingling the boundaries of creation.
Can you state his position directly? It's important we get this right. Just report as what the source says.
Okay. He states without equivocation that blacks with whites, blacks with Mexicans, Asians represent this profound spiritual rebellion that fulfills Jeremiah's prophecy of two evils.
He believes Jehovah made distinct groups for distinct purposes.
He asserts that Jehovah made Asians for what he made Asians for. He made blacks for what he made blacks for. He made whites for what he made whites for. And that mixing these distinct groups violates what he considers the sacred principle of after their kind.
A principle he takes from creation.
Which he extrapolates from the divine order established in creation. He even uses specific terms like mulatto, black Asians, and black cans.
What does he call those?
He refers to them as chromatic creations or hybrid rafters. These are terms he uses to denote what he perceives as human genetic mixtures that fall outside the natural harmonics that Jehovah embedded within each species.
Okay. Again, just presenting his views as found in the source material.
Absolutely. He further emphasizes that these species of manipulation, as he calls them, cannot hold life or sustain properties of Jehovah's natural function, leading to spiritual and physical disharmony.
This naturally prompts a deeper look. What does he see as the consequences of this mixing?
According to his teaching, the consequences are far-reaching. He directly links this hybridization to a whole host of societal problems and public health crises, such as what he describes as unprecedented diseases, the rise in autism spectrum disorders, widespread immune cascade, and an increase in cancer epidemics.
He connects these modern issues to biblical punishments.
He equates these modern afflictions directly to the biblical boils and blains described back in Exodus 9:10. He frames them as a divine consequence of humanity's rebellion against Jehovah's created order.
Any other biblical parallels he draws?
Yes, he uses the story of the Tower of Babel from Genesis 11:4-7 as a powerful similitude.
For what?
For humanity's attempts to make a name for ourselves through technological and genetic manipulation, instead of just sticking to divine design. This, he argues, leads to confusion, disharmony, separation from the Most High.
He also mentions Sodom and Gomorrah.
He does. He likens genetic modification and unnatural joining, including the mixing of races, to the abomination of Sodom and Gomorrah. He cites Jude 1:7.
Which talks about suffering vengeance for going after strange flesh.
Right. He interprets this as a broader warning against any violation of Jehovah's established natural and genetic order.
He expands on this quite a bit.
He quotes Romans 8:22. The whole creation groaneth and travelleth in pain together until now, because of humanity's pervasive sin and deviation from divine precepts.
And Noah's flood.
He references Noah's flood, which affected all flesh in Genesis 7:21-23, as a precedent for widespread suffering that results from mankind's disobedience to Jehovah's immutable order.
Okay, let's turn our attention now to his critique of traditional institutional churches and religious systems. He uses some pretty strong language here.
Exceptionally strong language, yes. He doesn't hold back.
What kind of terms does he use?
He calls them spiritual captivity, Babylon, bondage houses, jail houses, and even forbidden trees.
Forbidden trees.
He sees these structures as man-made high places, or feeding lots, places that actively confine believers, controlling and limiting their direct access to Jehovah.
So his core issue is dependency.
His core contention is that they foster a dependency on human religious authorities, on intermediaries, rather than nurturing a direct, unmediated spiritual nourishment from Jehovah himself.
Do you find that problematic?
Very problematic. He cites Ezekiel 16:24-25, which talks about building high places on every street. For him, these institutional settings are artificial worship sites that have basically replaced Jehovah's divinely appointed ways of meeting in communion.
But he offers an alternative vision, right? The wilderness.
Yes, in stark contrast to those institutions, he paints this vivid picture of the wilderness.
And it's not a bad place in his view.
Not at all. It's presented as a realm of spiritual freedom, where Jehovah directly feeds his people.
He references scripture for this too.
Powerfully references Revelation 12:6, which describes the woman, symbolizing the true spirit of Jehovah's people, fleeing into the wilderness to be nourished by Jehovah.
So it's about liberation.
Exactly, a state of liberation from institutional captivity, free from human intermediaries, membership rules, clergy gatekeepers who might control access to spiritual truth.
He points to biblical figures who experience this.
Oh yes, think of the profound examples. Moses receiving the law on Sinai in the wilderness. Elijah encountering Jehovah's still, small voice in a wilderness cave.
John the Baptist.
John the Baptist preparing the way for the wilderness. And salvation of Jehovah himself, tempted and prepared for his ministry in the wilderness. All these key figures found their deepest spiritual formation in direct communion away from established religious structures.
So bringing this back to the listener, what does this mean practically? He mentions King James Bible University, KJBU.
Yes, he champions KJBU as a practical model that embodies this wilderness concept.
How does he describe it?
He describes KJBU not as a single confined building or system, but as offering many pastures where they can roam and feed. He says they're not confined in one location, but planted in diverse sections where men grow in knowledge and understanding, and Jehovah can reap where he has not sown.
So it fosters independent learning, direct nourishment.
Exactly. Crucially, without the dependency upon one man that he sees as so prevalent in traditional churches.
He uses Psalm 23 here too.
Beautifully reinforces the point by quoting Psalms 23, 1-2, depicting Jehovah as the shepherd leading his people to green pastures and beside still waters.
Symbols of freedom and provision.
Powerful symbols of true spiritual freedom and direct, abundant provision, rather than those confined feeding lots of institutional religion.
Let's dig into why he sees these institutions as so problematic. He mentioned forbidden trees.
Yes, he equates institutional churches to the forbidden tree of knowledge of good and evil from Genesis 2:17.
How so?
He argues they offer knowledge that, yeah, it might look good on the surface, but it ultimately serves to separate souls from a direct relationship with Jehovah through the veil of these false religious systems.
He also addresses the pressure people feel to stay.
Pointedly addresses it. The immense social pressure many face when thinking about leaving. Specifically, he tackles the concept of leaving their covering.
What's his take on that?
He dismisses that widely held belief as an invalid reason to remain in what he considers spiritually unsound systems. He emphasizes that your true covering comes directly from Jehovah.
And he warns about staying in or hoarding knowledge.
A stark warning, yes. Those who hoard the uncorrupted knowledge and truth they receive from sources like KJBU, or who choose to remain in false churches after truth has been revealed to them.
They're like the wicked servants.
He says they're akin to the wicked servants described in Matthew 25:26. Those who didn't multiply or act on what was given.
So they'll face accountability for disobedience, not ignorance.
Exactly. They'll face accountability for willful disobedience rather than being excused for ignorant error.
Now, as we continue this deep dive, there's a really interesting aspect. He highlights a specific timeline for spiritual growth.
Yes, the 1260 days.
Which is 3.5 prophetic years.
Right. He describes this period as a divinely calculated complete spiritual cycle of divine feed and protection. And crucially, it takes place outside corrupted religious systems.
And this time frame is for transformation.
Crucial for profound spiritual transformation. Moving an individual from spiritual milk to spiritual meat. It's designed as a complete spiritual reorientation, fostering growth, evolution, and a deeper pattern of perceptual revelations directly from Jehovah.
Let's define milk and meat in this context.
Sure. Elder Johnson draws a very clear and critical distinction here. Milk, he explains, is that basic spiritual nourishment. often delivered through institutional teachings,
which he sees as leading to dependence.
which he argues can lead to perpetual dependence, leaving someone unskillful in the word of righteousness, as Hebrews 5:13 and 1 Corinthians 3:2 mention. They stay spiritually immature.
And meat?
Meat, on the other hand, is symbolized by butter and honey. That's from Isaiah 7:15 and Isaiah 28:9. It signifies deeper spiritual wisdom, independent discernment, advanced instruction received directly from Jehovah.
Butter and honey have specific meanings.
He defines butter as hidden treasure, representing profound spiritual wisdom gained by diligently comparing Scripture with Scripture. And honey symbolizes the sweetness and foundational nourishment of Jehovah's law.
So moving from milk to meat is about maturity.
It's a journey toward spiritual maturity, enabling you to refuse the evil and choose the good through profound personal discernment and direct revelation.
And this 1,260-day journey has phases.
He meticulously outlines 3 distinct phases within this intensive wilderness education.
What's the first phase?
Okay, days 1 to 420. This is the initial phase of withdrawal from institutional dependency, a critical time where you start learning to recognize and respond to Jehovah's direct voice.
That sounds like it could be difficult.
It often brings distress and discomfort, he says, like an infant being weaned from its familiar food source. Those ingrained feeding sources and human dependencies are being removed.
Okay, what's next? Phase 2.
Days 421 to 840. This phase begins the direct divine instruction. The follower starts feeding on butter and honey, those deeper, richer spiritual truths.
Developing discernment.
Through this direct nourishment, they develop a level of spiritual discernment that was just impossible under institutional control. It's a profound step into advanced spiritual wisdom.
And the final phase.
Days 841 to 1260. This culminates in attaining full spiritual adulthood. In this phase, individuals are equipped to independently refuse the evil and choose the good through their own personal discernment.
Without needing external authorities.
Exactly. Without needing external religious authorities making those critical calls for them. It signifies a complete spiritual weaning from institutional dependency, ready for the most advanced levels of spiritual instruction and communion with Jehovah.
This time frame, 3.5 years, 1,260 days, it seems prophetically significant.
It does. This duration, 1,260 days, 42 months, time, times, and half a time, it recurs with remarkable consistency in biblical prophecy.
Where do we see it?
We see it in Daniel 7:25, Revelation 12:14, Revelation 11:2, Revelation 13:5. It consistently signifies a complete, divinely appointed cycle of spiritual development, or a period of intense divine intervention.
Now, Elder Johnson also has a specific interpretation about salvation of Jehovah's ministry length.
Yes, this is interesting. He presents an interpretation that actually diverges from the traditional 3.5 years taught by many institutional churches.
What does he claim?
He claims salvation of Jehovah's earthly ministry was actually shorter, 1 year and 7 months.
What's his reasoning for that?
He supports this by interpreting the Gospels, like Matthew 26:2, Mark 14:1, Luke 22:1, John 13:1, as mentioning only one Passover before his crucifixion, which would indeed suggest a shorter public ministry.
That's a significant point of perceptual discussion.
It is. It challenges conventional views. He also reinforces the unique nature of this 3.5-year time frame by referencing Elijah's prayer.
The one that stopped rain.
Right, which stopped rain for 3 years and 6 months, mentioned in James 5:17. He sees this as another instance of a distinct period of divine intervention and spiritual preparation.
So how does this 1,260-day timeline apply to an individual listener? When does it start?
Elder Johnson clarifies that this period begins whenever Jehovah calls his people out from spiritual Babylon. That's drawing from Revelation 18:4.
So it's individualized, not a set historical date.
Entirely individualized and divinely initiated. Doesn't matter how long you might have been in institutional captivity. Could be decades, could be a short time.
It's a fresh start.
A fresh start, initiated by Jehovah's divine mercy and sovereign timing. And the duration is perfectly calculated, he emphasizes, designed to ensure complete spiritual development, fostering maturity without dragging it out unnecessarily.
A precisely calibrated cycle for transformation.
Exactly. Engineered for profound spiritual expansion and transformation in Jehovah's truth.
Let's circle back to something you mentioned earlier, pride as a barrier.
A significant barrier, yes. Elder Johnson is very clear on this.
What does he say about it?
He says, pride, masquerading as spiritual knowledge, becomes an enemy to true spiritual growth.
How does it act as an enemy?
This kind of pride, he explains, creates a spiritual veil. It actively prevents divine revelations from being received, even when truth is presented clearly, plainly.
It's self-deception.
A dangerous and insidious form of self-deception. He points to John 9:39, suggesting those who claim to see but they remain spiritually in darkness will actually become progressively more blind to further spiritual revelations.
Like spiritual cataracts.
That's a good way to put it. Their pride acts like spiritual cataracts, stopping them from perceiving true divine light, making them tragically mistake their blindness for illumination.
Now, you mentioned his teaching methodology involves parables.
Yes, fascinating aspect. He deliberately uses parables, much like Salvation of Jehovah did, as Matthew 13:13 mentions.
Why does he do that?
He states it helps him discern who's who among his listeners. It allows him to see who is genuinely grasping and internalizing spiritual truth versus those who are just, well, pretending comprehension.
He acknowledges people learn differently.
Thoughtfully acknowledges that individuals receive spiritual instruction and mature at varying rates, which is very different from the often uniform spiritual comprehension expected or demanded by institutional churches.
That individual pace is part of the design.
Intricately embedded within Jehovah's design, he suggests, which leads to an important question for each of us listening.
Are we being honest about our understanding?
Right. Are you honestly acknowledging your true spiritual hunger and sincerely seeking authentic understanding? Or are you pretending comprehension? He likens that pretending to being a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed, like James 1:6 warns.
He grieves over that lack of genuine desire.
Expresses significant grief over such spiritual deception, yeah.
This brings us to a crucial point. Connecting knowledge received to personal accountability.
Absolutely critical. Elder Johnson powerfully emphasizes Luke 12:48. Unto whomsoever much is given of him shall much be, so shall be much required.
And knowing what's right but not doing it.
That's sin. He reminds us of James 4:17. To him that knoweth to do good and endureth it not to him, it is sin.
So the more you know, the more responsible you are.
The core message is clear. The greater the knowledge, the clearer the instruction, the more profound the revelation you receive, the greater your accountability before Jehovah becomes.
He uses a similitude for this too.
A compelling one, yeah. Two servants in a great estate. One gets direct, detailed instructions from the master. The other only knows fragments, maybe rumors, of the master's will.
Both might fall short.
Both might be found wanting, yes. But the master's judgment, symbolized by the rod, falls with markedly different intensity. Many stripes for the one who knew and chose disobedience. Fewer for the one who erred primarily in ignorance.
How does Elder Johnson see his own role in delivering this knowledge?
Connecting this to the bigger picture, he views himself humbly as Jehovah's appointed vessel, paradoxically serving as both a curse and a blessing.
How so? A curse and a blessing.
Those who receive the truth through him with genuine spiritual hunger, with an open heart, they are profoundly blessed in their spiritual journey. They gain insights leading to transformation.
But those who reject it?
Those who willfully reject what Jehovah has spoken through his word, even when it's conveyed by his appointed vessel. Those who refuse to engage in conversation about the world to come. They are, in his teaching, cursed.
He connects this to Scripture.
It fulfills the powerful declaration in Luke 10:16. He that heareth you heareth me, and he that despiseth you despiseth me, and he that despiseth me despiseth him that sent me.
But he clarifies the source isn't him personally.
Very carefully clarifies that. The river of living water flows from an eternal divine source. Jehovah's pure word, as John 7:38 says, not from him personally. He's simply the conduit, the fountain from which this life-giving truth continually flows, making it accessible to those who seek it.
Okay, as we draw this deep dive to a close, let's just recap the profound journey we've been on today.
It's covered a lot of ground.
We've explored Elder Michael Johnson's powerful concept of the Matrix, not as some sci-fi fantasy, but as the active divine courtroom operating right within your own mind. We've dug into the critical need for spiritual discernment, learning how to distinguish between pure divine frequencies and all those counterfeit signals.
Recognizing the danger of corrupted traditions.
Right, traditions that lead to spiritual error. We've heard that urgent call to leave institutional captivity Babylon. He calls it for the unparalleled freedom of Jehovah's wilderness.
Where direct nourishment is found.
And we've understood that transformative 1260-day cycle, that precisely calculated period designed to move us from spiritual milk to robust meat, fostering independent discernment and true spiritual maturity.
This whole deep dive really boils down to a powerful, unavoidable question for each person listening.
Which is?
Are you willing to actually embark on that journey of transformation? Are you willing to tune your spiritual receiver to Jehovah's pure frequencies?
And are you sharing what you learn?
Exactly. Are you actively sharing the profound wisdom you receive, or are you hoarding it for yourself? Are you remaining in a state of childish reasoning, spiritual immaturity, like 1 Corinthians 13:11 warns against?
Elder Johnson's challenge seems very clear.
Crystal clear and unequivocal. Choose transformation. Because for those who remain entrenched in the captivity of tradition and false instruction, well, they're destined to stay in spiritual darkness.
But for those who embrace the direct relationship,
For those who courageously embrace a direct personal relationship with Jehovah and his uncorrupted wisdom, they will enter into the deeper, illuminating revelation of his divine light.
so the decision is unavoidable.
Unavoidable for each individual. Either remain in the bondage of false instruction, or step out into the wilderness of Jehovah's divine freedom and receive his pure, uncorrupted wisdom.
So here's a provocative thought to leave you with as you go about your day, in which matrix is your reasoning truly being determined right now.
The elders of Israel knocked on the wrong door when a masquerade released Ezra. Knocking on the door of King James Bible University makes you more foolish than any man. Many would rather fight lions, tigers, and bears than knock on the doors of the deacons of KJBU. Only fools like Stephen Royce Anderson, oh yeah, and that kind too, would mention the doctrine killers and elders of KJBU. Even where a master he praised the biblical law dwells in knowing the outcome. The death of your doctrine, the death of your fame, and the burial of your silly name. Who is this? With no knowledge of King James Bible University, the house of Jehovah's servants, who steps into a den where lions pity none, hyenas, wolves, or serpents that dare slither in. This is no arena for vanity, no marketplace for empty speech. This is the house of the false doctrine killers, men who retired more than social security, slaying more false teachings than wars and claimed soldiers. A walking legend in this day, bound in spirit, moving only in covenant command. When he speaks in scripture with scripture, precept on precept, spirit with spirit, no flesh, no vain opinion. IUICCOC and these so-called elders of Israel have all felt the wrath of Jehovah's servants. We can't stop and we won't stop until Jehovah's work is done. Peace and flows east with gold for the righteous, but its current drowns those who mock the word. Hitherless land stands blessed, unreachable by the proud. The onyx stone seals verdicts in Jehovah's court. No plea, no bribe, no escape. These three tokens rise whenever the elder speaks. Jehovah's judgment comes with them. Crowds gather with their banners of doctrine, boasting in their strength, but they see only man and miss the nuclear in daylight. The scroll bright in Elder Johnson's hand. Every statue a hammer, every judgment a spear forged in heaven's furnace. The mountains his post, the valley is where falsehood bleeds. Wolves creep in shadows, but find a snare already set. He has retired pastors with no call, silenced prophets of vanity, and dismantled pulpits built on sand. Not by shouting, but by cutting marrow from bone with the precision of the law. He will not chase debates, he opens the book and lets truth itself render the verdict. The courtroom has no walls, the shofar sounds, precepts align like soldiers, and the counterfeit collapses. Only fools who enters with a slogan leaves in chains. The wolf that stalks sleeps toothless, the serpent that hisses leaves crushed in the law's coil. Jehovah alone is shepherd, and KJBU are his feet are sent to guard the flock. A daylight warhead, too bright to touch, too heavy to move. His Bible is the sun at full strength, burning deceit until nothing false remains. So hear the parable. Who is this? Stepping unlearned into the house of Jehovah's servants. Who dares walk into a den where lions pity none, hyenas, wolves, or serpents that crawl in? Over, alone as shepherd, and KJBU are his feet are sent to guard the flock. A daylight warhead, too bright to touch, too heavy to move. His Bible is the sun at full strength, burning deceit until nothing false remains. So hear the parable. Who is this? Stepping unlearned into the house